The raid is upon us for some time now, and we have TLW.
Yes, Tier List Wednesday, and it's coming at you hot after the Race World First kind of concluded. Well, really, at the time of this recording, we only have Echo and Limit winning, and Method is still rank 3, so we'll see how actually that ends.
They're still working on it.
Yeah, and this is kind of caveating into what we're going to be looking at today in terms of melee for the raid. And man, it's a little bit weird this time around.
It's a lot of disclaimer stuff to be talked about here. We're gonna basically describe what all the tiers mean, and there's definitely a very different version of what you can see on Warcraft logs versus what the guys from Race the World First used, versus what heroic logs are looking. So we're trying to like make something out of all of this data and have like a proper image. Let's talk about the tiers basically. Are we gonna go to like all the tiers once we get to them, or just explain?
Yeah, we can go into tiers as we're approaching the tiers. What people just need to know is that this is different. There's no data for all of it in the same amount, so it's kind of hard to judge.
Well, especially mythic logs. So there's very few mythic logs for some specs, and it's very hard to like determine what and when. But we do have a lot of heroic logs for most of the specs, so I guess we'll see when we get to each and every spec. Let's start it off with Arms Warrior, which I guess is consistent in terms of like everything. Wherever you look at data, it's kind of there. Let's talk about like, okay, so this is gonna be a C tier. Now, C tier does not mean it's not playable, it does shit damage or anything like that. I guess it's maybe a more of a niche place for the specs.
C tier is kind of like your average Joe, right? Anybody can play C tier. They're gonna be able to clear the bosses. Everybody in C tier has killed Razageth in heroic and has probably already started clearing some mythic bosses to an extent, depending on where the tier set is, what the guild strategy is. So I think it's fine. It's obviously going to be a little bit below the top performers, at least right now, as people are getting their tier set going.
Yeah, this is the main thing. A lot of the specs you're gonna see here now, especially when we're talking about warriors, you know, there's always that argument of where, okay, Arms is a very niche spec, but maybe Fury you have seen in the Race the World First. There's a lot more logs for them. So when we get to it, you're gonna see that, you know, the rankings are a bit different depending on the spec within the class, okay? Next up is Assassination Rogue. And to no surprise, we've predicted this correctly. We've seen it happen all in all into Race the World First on the logs. You look at heroic logs, you look at mythic logs, you know, everything points out to Assassination being just a beast.
It's a beast.
Single target is there's almost no match for them. I think like the burst that has the consistency, the spec is basically still able to do its damage due to like all of the mechanics it has because of bleeds and dots and poisons and all of that. You know, jumping to a different platform.
It's not flat. It's flat.
It's not punishing, right? Because it doesn't gain the same punishment as I don't know, a Subtlety Rogue or an Outlaw Rogue, right? So this is like the main win of Assassination. It has like super competitive damage, especially in single target.
Tell the people where it goes, man.
It's an S tier, guys. I mean, this is no surprise.
First S tier. So this is a little bit of a caveat because you might see specs into S tier that you probably haven't seen in Race World First. S tier specs are just pumping. That's just how it is. And at this point in time in the universe, S tier is just really wrecking in the numbers, which is likely going to change, but we'll see how that comes about in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, the specs from S tier just dominate pure damage. That's it. No questions asked. All right, Enhancement Shaman. I think a respectable spec.
This has been quite a surprise, and I think I've seen it in certain guilds in the Race World First that they have been used. Actually, even if I haven't seen them, the people have been using them in the rosters. Some of the guilds used Enhancement to clear the entire thing. Some of them use it for a couple of bosses. Enhancement is, let's say, the benchmark of what a really good spec would be. It's going all the way into A tier.
A tier for
and
sure.
It does a lot of damage. It is the Shaman DPS spec of choice, you could say.
And it's melee, so this time around, and usually this kind of happens in the first season of every new expansion, melees are just like wrecking stuff all over the place, right? So we had this talk about the Shaman class when we did the range tier list and Mythic Plus. When you're gonna have Enhancement performing as great as it performs, most of the elemental mains probably switched up to Enhancement. Like really competitive. It's up there. Next up on the list, Feral Druid.
The kitty cat.
Now, listen, guys, this is gonna be a little bit controversial in terms of like where we place this, because you're gonna see Feral Druids in a lot of guilds being like super. I would say the top of the damage.
Yeah.
No problems. Now, when we look at mythic logs, there's not that many. There's a couple, not that many. When we look at heroic logs, there's a lot of them. On Ritual first, do we have ferals in?
No, well, I don't know. The top guilds haven't used ferals. They've all been using boomkins, well, that's probably what will skew some of the performance of feral. Feral right now is C tier together with arms. It's not particularly clear which is better. I mean, numbers-wise, arms is slightly ahead of feral, so we cannot really tell. And in the mythic logs, not all of the ferals have done the same amount of bosses as everybody else, so it's kind of hard to tell how far ahead can feral push. And if balance is pushing so much in the race wall first is skewing the performance perspective for everybody, it's likely that top guilds that are striving for Hall of Fame will give their tier pieces to boomies. So probably ferals will suffer a little bit, but that doesn't mean that they're bad. That just means that they're not prioritized, and by not prioritized meaning that we don't really have what to look and to judge feral by. So
true. And I think this is a good time to also mention that at the time of this recording, this is the data we're having here. Now, by the time you see this video, it's probably
going to be a day or two ahead. So it's probably going to change, and that's not the point. The point is that the meta does actually change, and with this we can also mention the fact that look how many buffs and nerfs we keep seeing. So it's likely that this is not even gonna be final. Like, we've never had in the last couple of years so many buffs and nerfs and tuning happen so quick during the actual raid. So it's really fun to see how this will all change.
Yeah, it's always interesting, and plus you have to take note that in a lot of these logs, most of them don't have still their 4 pieces yet. Okay, so this is also something that will massively improve some of these specs moving forward. It's gonna be interesting to see how it evolves. Okay, let's talk about Frost Death Knight. Which Frost Death Knight, I mean, you can definitely see it being in that safe zone, very good spec. I would say like your average Joe can play it and be on top of the charts, no problemo.
Surprising actually that it's numbers-wise. I think, I mean, performance-wise is doing slightly better than Unholy, which we kind of argued it's a B tier spec, and we'll talk about what B tier means. Frost DK essentially has been, you kind of want long breath of Sindragosa windows, and that usually happens with bigger eye level. But as it is now, I mean, Frost DK has been used in Race World first, and this is where kind of the B tier kind of breaks apart the entire scope of the tier list. Is B tier specs are essentially specs that are really good, are, let's say, something that everybody can use, are definitely specs that have been used by Race World First guilds. The reason why they're not higher, because, they've won the race with them, is because it's very niche. The guilds that are using them for specific reasons. It's very hard for everybody to use them for the exact same reasons, and in terms of numbers and analytics, it's looking like they're kind of around middle of the pack in terms of overall performance.
That's true, and it's kind of the same story for a lot of the specs you're gonna see in B tier here. I mean, if you're playing one of these specs and you see, oh my god, that it's being ranked into B tier, that doesn't mean shit. If you play your spec correctly, you're gonna be on top of the charts, as opposed to somebody that maybe picked up Assassination, doesn't know how to play it, and he or she will not do well in the raid. So just play whatever you like. I think all of the specs except one over here can do massively well. We'll get to it. Let's talk about Fury Warrior, and I guess a similar story.
Similar as Frost. I mean, we've seen. I think Revis was playing Fury when I was looking at. I don't remember. I think there was. I don't know what boss they were on.
But they were there. I mean, there was definitely Fury. Definitely was in
and that's what's important is that as far as I know, and I could be wrong, Revis is a very big arms warrior fan, very big arms warrior player. Maybe, but he's obviously an amazing warrior in and of itself, and he played arms in a time where people didn't play arms in Race World First, and yet still he played Fury this time around, which should actually tell you how good Fury is. Fury's a B tier.
Front of the B tier.
Front of the B tier, obviously slightly better in terms of performance in front of arms, and also in the scope of mythic progression, it's doing a lot better as well. And even though it is a B tier, obviously it's pumping.
Oh yeah, it's pumping. Now, Demon Hunter, Havoc Demon Hunter. Again, another one within the B tier, and we can talk about its damage profile and how much it can do with all of the bosses. I mean, Havoc right now is I would say almost a Swiss Army knife. It can do well in almost any scenario within the raid. I think like when it comes to like competing, because we have to talk about this. So just boiling it down to competing in damage raw numbers, there's really no competition between the S tiers and the B tiers. Now, what does this mean? This doesn't mean that if you're playing a Havoc, you will be, I don't know, super shadowed by all of the rogue specs or enhancement shamans or whatever, you're gonna do just fine. Plus, playing a Havoc Demon Hunter always brings you that nice utility. And let's just talk about this. Is gonna be a B tier.
That's actually probably why Havoc is so hard. I mean, we know that Havoc is doing one of the best performances in Mythic Plus, and it's likely that Havoc is also a really good addition for a raid in, you know, those primal council fights and fights with a lot of ads. And not to mention that, you know, everybody progressing through the raid wants to play Protection Warrior. Likely you won't see that many Vengeance, so Havoc will probably be your Demon Hunter of choice for, you know, the Chaotic Brand, the Darkness, and all of that stuff.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Now, Outlaw Rogue. I mean, it's a rogue spec, so I think, again, no surprise, we predicted this once again, because we kind of saw like the damage profile and the tools it has. There's like a lot of fights where you need that Outlaw Rogue, I would say, toolkit, because there's either cleave or AoE. Obviously, you have like Teros was like pure single target, but even there, you're gonna see a lot of Outlaw Rogue stopping the charts. It's a struggle between Outlaw, Assassination, and some other spec. We're gonna get
I wonder what it is.
But Outlaw is like in front of the pack right now in terms of like
one of the best DPS specs in the game, period, right now.
It's very consistent, and it's like if you manage to like just juggle all of the things it has to be juggled with, you can have a great performance with it. You saw the spec in like almost all content. You see it, and it has like the most logs. Also, this is very important. You can see tons of logs on Outlaw, in Heroic, on Mythic. You've seen it like in Race to World First. You've seen Assassination there as well. It's just a great spec, and in terms of performance, there's really no match for it. The numbers are just there, like above almost everything else. I would say like its biggest competitor is Assassination.
And in the raid at the very least.
Yeah, so this is like the best spec so far.
There might be a big competitor to Outlaw that's not Assassination, and that's not Red Paladin.
Oh my god, Red Paladin.
But dude, I mean, we trash Red Paladin, but mostly about its design. However, Red is actually pumping some serious numbers right now, and Red is in the B tier with the boys.
Yeah, better than Frost DK. And I was like, the damage profile of Red Paladin is still very competitive. I think I remember when Max was doing like a tier list early on, they would say, I think it was Bolas there, and Bolas mentioned, listen man, you can have a bad design for a spec and still do good damage. Now, would they take it to Race to World First? Well, they would take it if the damage was absolutely insane, which it was not. I don't think I've seen a Red in any comp of Race to World First.
I think in the Race World First, what they took from B tier, I don't know
like
if it was mostly for the utility. I mean, they obviously got their Frost DK for the AMZ, and obviously the damage was good. Havoc for the darkness and all stuff. Fury, I mean, it depends, because, you know, Fury has, let's say, an extra inspiring shout. The HP shout, it slips my mind right now. I don't know what they would use a red for.
I don't either. That's the thing.
But that's the Race Wolf first. It's like
that's just given that example. But you do see pretty good logs on Heroic and Mythic for Red Paladins, and you can see them. They're performing pretty well. And again, guys, the B tier just means that, you know, they're very, very good. There's just a huge difference in terms of like the final damage profile from, let's say, an Outlaw Rogue and a Red Paladin. But you play in a Red Paladin in the raid, you're gonna be just fine.
Yeah.
Just saying. Now,
now,
are we talking about another rogue spec?
There's another rogue spec. Listen, man, sometimes rogue specs just need to stick together. So, freaking
Subtlety.
I think this might be one that I don't know about you, but I did not expect it to be in this year. It got a lot of flack at the beginning of the expansion. Obviously, we didn't really have any kind of like raid data for it outside of, you know, beta raid testing.
We had the testing, and we've seen, and the testing wasn't really that reassuring for Subtlety Rogues, but they have gone through some changes, and I think at the end of the day that all of the numbers that got tuned for Subtlety were just hitting the mark, and this is like the main competition you're gonna have on S tier, okay? So this is between the rogue specs,
dude. rogue players have to be like the happiest players.
Oh yeah, so you can play whatever spec you want as a rogue within the raid. Obviously, you have to learn how to play it properly, and, you know, get used to the mechanics and all of that. But just talking about subtlety, I think at this point we can definitely talk about a matter of flavor, because to be real, I guess subtlety may suffer the most in terms of like when they have to do, I don't know, cleave. Although cleave has been fixed, don't get me wrong, but it still cannot compare to Outlaw cleave, for example. Assassination has some tools right now that can address that. But at the end of the day, I think all rogue specs, but they're doing great. Assassination and Subtlety specifically, I think they can pull ahead in fights like Terranos, for example.
And we do want to make a special footnote for Subtlety at the end of the video, so stay tuned for that, because there is something else that we want to add to this tier list, and we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about...
Okay, it's time. It's time,
about
baby.
Survival Hunter.
Oh my god.
It
man.
seems like we're back to pre-tier set in Sepulchre Survival Hunter, where it's all the way at the bottom. Like, okay, the thing is, our tier lists usually have like 5 tiers, right? We don't have the F tier, but if there was an F tier, there would be no specs into D tier, similar as M+, and Survival would be into F. Survival is actually doing very, very, very poorly in terms of overall performance. We don't have a Survival in our raid, and I still haven't seen a Survival actually perform, and I haven't played mine yet, so I don't really know how good they actually are as opposed to what the numbers would indicate. But Survival is also the least played spec in the raid, which was very hard to take like Mythic locks, because I think there's about two parses. There's 15 parses at the time of the recording this on Aeronaught for Survival, which is the first boss. That's an easy boss. That's like nothing, so it doesn't really say much. But further down the raid, like fewer and fewer Survivals have actually been killing any other bosses. And right now, since we're still in the Hall of Fame season of the raid, people are very, very particular about what specs they bring in the heroic logs. There's a couple of hundred survival parses, still a little bit low, so it's kind of hard to ignore. Even though we kind of want to point out that, you know, you can probably play anything and you'll do just fine. We're not really sure about Survival, to be
Survival
fair.
would be like, I think, the only spec that we would be like with a question mark. I'm not sure that this is like the right choice. I'm sure there's like people that are playing Survival in normal and heroic that are doing just fine. But the thing is, when we take data, right? So we take data from heroic, we take data from mythic. Obviously, there's no Survival Hunter in Race to World First or whatever. There's also the fact that Marksman is just kicking ass all over the place.
Is dominating.
And this may be one of the reasons you don't see as many logs over there.
It's the Feral discussion, right? Because Boomy's outshining Feral, so yeah.
But Feral is doing really great.
Feral is like leagues. That's the thing, because the C tier are way above Survival, right? So we would have like an empty tier between Survival and C tier.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about Unholy Death Knight, which is very respectable C tier. I guess like I was kind of expecting more, but again, this is a congregate here for all of the data.
Same here. Unholy is kind of like the whole reason why the tier list is the way it is, because Unholy and Assassination, we'll get to that in a second, is because different people use Unholy differently. Like the mythic boys and gals are pumping really hard with Unholy, while the heroic people are seeing a little bit less, where the overall data is a little bit more rounded out, where the bell curve is a little bit more flattened, like more people in the middle range. Unholy is kind of where it is right now. It is likely that Frost got a lot more coverage in the Race World First. People are just playing Frost. I mean, between C and B tier is not a big difference. Definitely not like how it is between C and D tier. That's for sure.
Oh yeah.
So it's likely
S and B, because in terms of like the difference in pure performance is like huge from S to A. However, when we're talking about B and C tier in terms of like rating, we can strongly say that if you play any of these specs within your guild or whatever you're trying to pick one of these specs, you're gonna do just great. No problemo. If you're talking about heroic, even mythic, I don't see any problem with any of these specs. You can do fine as long as you master them. Obviously, you're gonna want to have some sort of like variety in the raid group. That's how it is. But by no means having Unholy DK in C tier means it's just bad and it cannot like compete or do its thing or contribute like impactfully to the progression you guys are setting out for yourselves. This is what we're saying. Then it's as Flame mentioned, right at the end we're gonna get to Windwalker, and at the end we're gonna look at a different picture and see exactly how a lot of these specs are rearranged. Okay. Speaking of Windwalker,
dude, this has been a nice surprise for Windwalker, seeing it all the way. Let's actually put it. It's all the way into A tier next to Enhancement.
Enhancement Shaman.
In terms of overall performance, Windwalker is not doing it's obviously doing really good. It's one of the A tier, and even if we go into in a couple of seconds into like overall progression logs and see exactly how that is, Windwalker's still doing a lot better. At least it feels like it's doing better than in previous years where people have had the gripes with the single target issue with Windwalker.
It was niche.
But at least we have a decent AoE in this raid that it's kind of actually needed.
I would say that like whatever spec can pull ahead in terms of AoE and cleave, it's gonna show up there. And this is the thing, when you do a congregate of data and you look at all of like the logs for all of these specs and different tiers of rating, like heroic, normal, mythic, plus, and you also look at how things have been evolving with Race to World First, it kind of boils down to a picture where, okay, where does our logic place a spec like Windwalker? Well, it has to be somewhere around A tier. And if you look at the performance and the damage breakpoints or whatever, you can see that, okay, when you pull out the data from a Windwalker and you compare it to I don't know, Unholy DK, maybe not the best example. Let's put it with the survival. The difference is humongous.
It's way much. And you said that, and I think this is a good segue. So this is kind of how the tier list is looking right now at the point of recording this. You'll see it like a day or two later. So it's probably gonna slightly change. Plus, we're gonna still have buffs and nerfs coming in around.
And I love that.
And normally, when we look and we do tier lists, we kind of look at the mythic performance because that's where the specs are taken to their max. That's when the whole potential is taken out of the spec. This time it was a little bit difficult because it was very early into the progression, and not everybody has proper logs. And making an assumption on 2 or 15 logs is nothing.
Yeah.
So when you look at mythic actual progression, to the extent that the guilds actually post their logs public, because not everybody's doing that.
What we're looking at now are like the logs that from like public mythic logs. Okay?
Yeah, the public. So whatever is public at the point of us recording, it's looking kind of like this, and you can see stuff like Unholy and Windwalker actually kind of swapping places, which is a little bit weird because we know Windwalker is doing really good. And at the same time, Assassination all the way down into B tier, where we know that Assassination has been used into A tier, so into S tier by Race to World First. So this is kind of to point out the fact that even every tier list has like a different depiction of their data, and just because it's placed in a certain way, that's just to to kind of answer the questions like where is this in terms of this raid. But that doesn't mean that's the be-all and all. So this is just to showcase how different they can be from one difficulty to the other, not only from that, but from our perspective as, let's say players, casual players, when compared to the Race to World First people that can take specs like Fury, which for whatever reason in our mythic analysis seems to be like all the way with Feral down in the list, but it's actually being used to like clear super high bosses.
Yeah, it's always a different version of like the composition and the usefulness of some specs when we talk about Race to World First. And this is the thing, right? You cannot make your decision or impression based on purely on how the boys and girls from Race to World First use them. Okay, that's not how it is. And we're still early on into the season, right? What we love about making these tier lists and having like to pull out of the data is to actually observe how these meta monsters evolve into the point where we're gonna get to that point. We're gonna have everybody's gonna have full 4-piece. We're gonna have all of the base or crafted items and stuff.
415, 420 eye level. Yeah,
that's gonna be interesting to see how all of these specs will be arranged. Not to mention all of the consistent and constant nerfs and tuning and buffs to all of these specs. But this is the first Raid M+.
How do you like them apples?
From Melee.
Yeah.
Raid Melee. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave it out in the comments and say what you think, what has been your experience playing within the Raid. What spec are you playing and how you feel in terms of like damage and how you're ranking up with all of your other guildies and stuff. Obviously, thank you, Patreons, for supporting the content. We love you guys.
Get it.
It's been holiday season. It's been
holiday
great.
Season.
Still doing some TLWs and all of that. And thank you for watching the video. You have a happy holiday still. We'll catch you with the ranged
in a couple of
days. On Friday.
Yes, Friday.
It's going to be on Friday. All right. Bye.
Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.